Hello everyone. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about various things, mainly the rule set by Fire and Sword, which is from a Polish company called Wargamer Poland, because I've just finished painting this group of Muscovites here, and it has taken me ages just to do this small group. You may remember I put up a video last September showing some of my Cossack figures for this set of walls. They're 15mm, and I started painting these, what are they, 7 bases of Muscovites shortly after I finished that video. So it's May now, so we're talking about 8 months where they've been sitting on my worktop, and it's been an absolute chore, really dragged. I've really had to sort of force myself to pick them up every now and again and put a slap paint on them, and I wanted to sort of talk about this set of rules, but why that happens, why we get why we lose enthusiasm for certain projects, why we inevitably build up, we carry on buying figures and building up our lead mountains regardless of the fact that there are certain projects that we can hardly bring ourselves to continue with, and talk about the rules in general. And what I'm going to do as well is try and sort of film this with 2 cameras and skip from one camera to another and then edit it later. Now, these figures are from a box set, a skirmish set of Muscovites which Wargamer Poland produce, and my aim really is to get this entire box painted up, and then I will have 2 sides that I can field Cossacks and Muscovites, and I'll be able to play some solo games to thrash out the rules a little bit in my head, and then sort of give you a sort of brief description of the rules. But also I will then be able to kind of take either one or other or both of these armies to the local wargaming club, where I know there is a friend of mine who has a Swedish force for this set of rules, and I have actually played against him a couple of times, but it was several years ago at least now, using the original rule set here. But one of the part of the problem was that I stopped going to that particular War Games club, so I'm going to be playing him at a second War Games club that's in Plymouth now. But one of the initial problems we had is this is a wonderfully appealing rule book. You can see the thickness of it. It's a massive tome, but the rules are very dense. There's lots to learn, lots of unique playing features in it. But you can see, I think you can get an impression from the quality of the printing and the quality of the photographs and the artwork and so on, how appealing this could be to draw you in and spark that initial enthusiasm, that initial frenzy that you want to get figures on the table and start playing this set of rules. And it's really I'm really interested in why you can't maintain that kind of impetus and keep going with one project, concentrate on one thing. Because the situation, what I tend to do is have about 4 or 5 different projects on the War Games table. Not the War Games table, my painting table, and rotate around them. So I'll do a little bit of work on one, and then while I'm waiting for something to paint to dry or glue to set or something on that particular unit of figures, I'll move them. I'll have them all on sort of separate trays, and I'll move them off, go around to the next one, and then go through them all. Try and discipline myself not to skip one of those projects, but to do each one in strict rotation, so that I know eventually I will end up something coming out of the end of that production line. But what tends to happen is that you lose sort of interest in one particular thing, as I did with these figures here, and so you'll only do a very brief bit of work on that particular project. Like you'll put one layer of one particular coat of paint on one particular item, such as the ones that have got spears maybe. It only take you half an hour to do at the most, and then you're on to the next project where you might spend a couple of hours on that one. So this is why these sort of things get slowed down. And that is certainly what's happening with me. I mean, at the moment, I've got things waiting. I can't wait to get to work on various things. Like I've recently thought I'd start wargaming the Arab Revolt and Lawrence of Arabia, and I've got some really beautiful figures that haven't even primed yet, ready to get going on that. And then only this weekend I made an impulse purchase at the Exeter show, and got into this game The Woods by Oakbound Studios that I'd never even heard of this time last week, and now I'm really kind of wrapped up in it. It's just such a wonderful world that is sort of created using Dark Age legends and mythology from around the British Isles. And I really want to get going on that, get some figures painted for that, and get them on the table and play with them and discuss the rules with you on this channel. But in the meantime, I've got all these older things, things like this that I'm really having to kind of pump myself to keep going. Things like the Peter Pigg set of rules Western that I purchased at Selwig last October, and which I'm trying to paint some 15mm figures up for that, and they are really draining me of energy, because I just can't motivate myself to paint them at the moment. And then I've got other things that I'm really keen to get done, like my Krantara Jacobites and my Peri Zulus, and my Crimean War project. There's constantly a presence on my painting table for that, but it's now been well over a year and a half, possibly 2 years since I began that project, and I still haven't even completed the British Army for that. So you can see how it happens. But to get back to By Fire and Sword in particular, I mean, I don't know while I've been talking if you formed an opinion of these figures, but I think they are absolutely dreadful, which is another element of why I haven't really sort of found much enthusiasm in painting them. Some of the metal is really brittle. It needs a lot of cleaning up, but you risk when you're trying to remove any excess metal or flash and mould lines and so on, you immediately risk damaging the figures or snapping them at the legs and so on. And it just sort of puts you off touching them, painting them. let's show you. I mean, in particular, that figure on the end there, I just find him absurd. He's sort of got some kind of carbine in his right hand, and he's waving his sword left-handed. He's got this really clumsy helmet, or I interpret it as being leather, because on the front cover of the art of the box here, there's one with a red, there he is. He's got a sort of red helmet there, which is far too bright, so I decided it was a sort of red leather. But yeah, what a chore to paint them. But the thing is, when you've finally got the group painted, there is a kind of cumulative appeal to them. And another thing I do like about, and another reason why I think By Fire and Sword gets away with having such poor figures, is that they have such a huge range of figures, and it's all kind of pre-packed for you, so you never have to worry about sourcing artillery from one range and cavalry from another and so on. And you end up with this really sort of there you can see the games do look good, even though if you were to sort of look up close to any of those figures, they probably would be just as bad quality as these ones here. It's just that it's the overall aesthetic appeal of this game that partly draws me in. It's partly the convenience of having everything under one roof, as it were, the rules, the figures, the scenery, all this scenery in the background here is produced by Wargamer Poland, and they have a massive amount of beautiful buildings. In fact, I like there's a nice windmill there. I like the buildings more than I do the figures. I can use them in a lot of other scenarios and war games. For instance, my Russian Civil War wargaming, and there are a lot of them will even do, even though the scale is slightly different, for the Crimean War. So I like all that, and I think that's part of their strength, is the fact that they have produced a really interesting set of rules. They've got very kind of novel, unique features to them. And the weakest element in the whole setup are their figures, but that still doesn't stop me wanting to get these figures painted, get more of them done, and finally get around to enjoying games at the local club. But on that subject, this has gone through various iterations since I first bought this book. I mean, after this, they brought out another supplement called The Deluge, and then there's been another book which kind of honed the rules, partly simplified them, made them slightly easier to pick up and fast to play. But the one I bought about September, October last year, when it was first released, was this one here, which is called Task Force. Now, this is another element of why By Fire and Sword managed to keep going, and they do kind of respond to the market. They understand their market, I think, because there is a big gap between playing games using these skirmish sets, which are to do what they say on the tin. They are for skirmish games, and then going up to a sort of divisional level, and you have to do it. A lot of figures to paint, and at 9 months just to do those, I've been spending the rest of my life just painting figures to get up to a divisional level game. But you have to do it in a very kind of strict fashion, so that you don't end up with, say, for the Poles, you don't end up with winged hussars before you've got that foundation of all the kind of more the duller things to paint. You know, the dismounted dragoons and the Cossacks and all this kind of stuff. You want to get on immediately and get onto the exciting stuff and the glamorous stuff like the Polish winged hussars. You can't do that using the army lists from this book. You've got to put the work in first of all. So build it up, you know, level by level. So this book here, Task Force, actually compromises on that issue, that it allows you to sort of field intermediate size armies that are probably less historically accurate, but more fun to play with, in that you can add all these more exciting kind of elements to your army more quickly. So this is the set of rules that I want to kind of concentrate on in the future. But my friend who has the Swedish army doesn't have this book. He has the original book and the later kind of supplement, not the Deluge, but the one that kind of tidied these rules up a little bit, which is part of the reason why I want to get two armies together and then try this out. Try this out at home first of all before I introduce him to it. So it's all kind of taking time. Another thing that I think isn't necessarily the case in the UK, and to be honest, a long time ago, I really thought this game was going to stall and not get anywhere. And I purchased this box set on eBay and got it at an absolute steal price. And I've got my suspicions that there was a company called Staffordshire Games who used to stock By Fire and Sword in the UK. Now you can only get their figures through North Star, I believe, and maybe one other company. I tend nowadays to purchase directly from Poland. But I got this an absolute steal, and it was from the seller was based in Staffordshire, and I got a lot of other stuff as well, a lot of Tartars that I haven't even, they're just there in my lead mountain, you know, probably going to be there forever. But I couldn't resist picking all these up really cheaply, because Staffordshire Games doesn't exist anymore. And I suspected that they either came from their stock that they were selling off, or from someone who had been local to their store and had got enthusiastic about it and bought a lot of figures, and then realised that he or she was never gonna complete the armies and didn't like the figures maybe. And at that stage, I really thought it was the end of this game. But they've kept going, and they've kept going mainly on the strength of their customers in Eastern Europe and Scandinavia. It's not very big in the UK. It deserves to be bigger, but I think one of the things that absolutely impels Eastern Europeans, and particularly the Polish audience, is the fact that the rules, By Fire and Sword, and there's the Deluge as well, are based on the works of a Nobel winning author called Heinrich Sienkiewicz, who was an author, a Polish author, writing at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th centuries. And as I say, he won the Nobel Prize for his work. He's mainly famous in the West for Quo Vadis. But it's such a popular work of literature in Poland in particular that kind of adds that extra background. It's not only your own nation's sort of history, so a bit like the English will enjoy wargaming, the English Civil War. This is far more likely historically to appeal to the Eastern Europeans. but it's also got that added bonus of having this wonderfully coloured narrative that Sienkiewicz's work has provided, and the novels have been serialised on Polish television. You can get that DVD. It's quite an interesting DVD to watch of the TV series and so on. So it's much more prominent in the minds of Polish wargamers than it is the British. But I thought the game was going to die out in the UK, and I'm sure that's one of the factors that does keep it alive. It's got a much bigger market in at the eastern end of Europe than it has in the UK. So over here you can pick these things up really cheaply, but yeah, you know, they're just, when you look at these figures, they're just on their own individually, they do nothing. You've got to go for this much larger kind of appeal. Look at them from a distance and enjoy the game. I think that's the solution. But it does mean, you know, that I know I've got the same kind of butterfly mentality as most of you out there. I just really kind of have to compel myself to sit down and carry on working on this project, and I'll get there eventually, get my games played, but you know, it could be another year or two before I get around to that. But anyway, I hope that kind of well, yeah, I'm sure that kind of resonates with a lot of you out there, that you have similar kind of surges of enthusiasm for something. You know, like I want to sort of get the rest of these figures out here. I only painted the cavalry, and that was a chore as well for another reason. That all the basically, there's a command stand, and there are 2 units of 3 bases, and these are they're mounted Cossacks, and the light horse that you put them on are exactly the same as the horses that the Cossack box set uses as well for my Cossack faction. So not only is it a matter of painting more horses, again, more cavalry, which is always additional work, but they were the same ones, so I had that same kind of tedium of painting these rather you know, awkward, ungainly figures. But anyway, I'm gonna persevere. I think you all probably recognise the same syndrome, and you've got figures in your lead mountain that you don't think you're ever going to get round to. But I think the way to do it, as I say, is to rotate and try and force yourself to do a little bit each day on these things, and even if it's just painting the eyes or something, you know, every tiny little step is one step closer to completing the project. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. Bye for now.